So now we
Yes.
come to the last session. People have been very patient. I mean, for since 3:30 for 2 hours, we had wonderful discussions, and beginning with South America, then the main theme of the seminar, that is the glory, the spiritual glory and the uniqueness, and finally we'll conclude with North America. So I extend my hearty invitation to Swami Satyamayanji, who's in the Vedanta, assistant minister in the Vedanta Society of Western Washington in Seattle. So he'll be speaking, as I had announced earlier, on the Vedanta movement in North America. Of course, that includes the Ramakrishna movement as well. So Swami Satyamayanji, I'll give you a brief introduction as he has sent it to us. He joined the Ramakrishna order at Advaita Ashrama, Kolkata in 1988. As all of you know, Advaita Ashrama Mayavati is a confluence of the East and West, a dream center of Swami Vivekananda. And we will be having the concluding talk, Swami Mayavati, a confluence of the East and the West. So he was there for some time as an editor, and he joined Advaita Ashrama. Of course, he joined at the Kolkata branch of Advaita, where they have two branches, one in Kolkata and the other one in Mayavati. He is an initiated disciple of Srimad Swami Bhuteshanji Maharaj, who was the 12th president of the Ramakrishna order, and he served Advaita Ashrama in various capacities till 2008. In 2008, he was posted to the Probationers Training Center, Belur Math, as an Acharya, where brahmacharis are taught the scriptures and Ramakrishna Vivekananda literature and other training is given, monastic training is given for 2 years. So he was Acharya, and in 2010, he was again posted to the Advaita Ashrama Mayavati, this time as an editor of Prabuddha Bharata, a journal which is one of the oldest English journals of the Ramakrishna order, started by Swamiji himself in 1896. So in 2014, he was appointed as head of Ramakrishna Mission in Kanpur. Then he was posted as assistant minister of our Vedanta Society of Southern California, Hollywood, in December 2018. And recently, in 2022, he has been assigned duties as assistant minister in Vedanta Society of Western Washington, that is in Seattle. So he has written some wonderful books, especially one book on mind, which you should all read. And he's author of three books and has written numerous articles. There's one on, I think, stories, I think, of Indian.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Ancient Sages.
Ancient Sages. Yeah, that's a wonderful book. We get so much of information in a nutshell. And about the mind, what is the name of that book?
Encountering the Memory Self.
Memory Self. Yes, that's a wonderful book. Yes. So he has also written, obviously, as the editor of Prabuddha Bharat, he has written numerous articles for the Ramakrishna orders, many journals. So without taking much time, we would like to hear from you, Swamiji, about the Ramakrishna movement as it unfolded in North America. It's an important phase of the Ramakrishna movement. So over to you, Swami Satyamayananda.
Thank you, Swami Sarvasthananji, for inviting me to this webinar and giving me the topic Vedanta Movement in North America. Let me start with one small quotation from Swami Vivekananda. He says, "I have a message for the West, like Buddha had a message for the East." There was a time when he was reluctant to preach, though Sri Ramakrishna had said, "Naren Shikka Deve," Naren will teach. And later on in his mature years, this is what he says, "I have a message for the East." He was clear in his mission in this world. It was a divine mission. And as Swami Sarvasthananji began, it was the first center of the Ramakrishna order in New York. And then even a little after that was the San Francisco Center. So we have very old centers that has started during Swamiji's time. There are today about 16 centers in North America. That includes the US and Canada. We have about 19 sub-centers. And we have under the Ramakrishna Ashram, an organization, about 8 private centers and numerous other centers unofficial, study circles, groups. But even though the number is staggering, yet the US and Canada, they have more than 20 million square kilometers and sparsely populated. The population of Canada is just 13.7 million, and the US is 327 million. It's a vast country. Most of our centers are congregated on the west and the east coast, with a few exceptions like St. Louis and Chicago in the middle. Of the west and the east are more populous, more liberal, more rich, more educated. And in the center, we have something called the huge Bible Belt. They are extremely religious and extremely fundamental. So that's the reason why in the center of America, we are so kind of scarce. We have an upcoming center in Kansas, of course, but that also is right now under St. Louis. Generally, the social situation in America today is, research has shown, sociology has shown, that there are about 7 classes of people. And the bulk of the people, the working and the middle class, form something like 84%. It's a huge number, huge. And then there are the poor people that comprise 7.3, and the ultra rich is 3.6. This growing disparity in wealth, education, health, and employment has given rise to much social unrest. Okay. Now, you've heard about reverse engineering. I'm going to do a kind of a reverse history. I'm going to speak about the current situation now and then proceed towards the roots of this foundation, this movement. And this movement, Swami here in the West have been speaking, it's not only confined to monks preaching, it's the devotees also are involved in this movement. So the social situation is extremely, extremely kind of restive. You may have read or heard about the situation, social situations in the US. It's really kind of on the boil. We have something called the Black Lives Movements, etc. So race or racism, gender identities, and also sexual identities, etc., have become activists. There was a time when it was quiet on the fringes. Now it's center stage. And this has given rise to a lot of problems in the sense of people are blaming each other, especially the government. And then there's also the police overreaction, drugs, gun laws, illegal immigration. All these things are kind of fueling this unrest. The biggest threat here today is homelessness. We have seen homeless people and shanties and slums in India. But if you see these things here in the US, it's kind of heartbreaking. Most of these homeless, I can categorically state that it is due to not only unemployment, the high cost of renting a house, but it is the problem of mental ill health. And this is raging across America. If a mental ill health patient will go to drugs, or a drug addict becomes a mental ill health patient, and as a result, everything starts spiraling downwards, and this person is now homeless. It is very, very sad. And Swamiji, in one of his, in many places, he spoke about the poor in India and the poor in the US. So he has said, poverty is associated with sin. In India, it is not. It is not sin. It is a long kind of story that these people have been playing out today. So this said, there is also now a growing number of people who claim themselves as nuns. That is, they have no religious affiliations. They are called nuns, N-O-N-E-S. Apart from that, there is a huge mass, a growing, you can say, consensus on atheism, agnosticism. They are people now worried that their churches are kind of going empty. Churches are being sold. People are, the social and economic and the cultural scene today in the US does not allow you to go for a kind of a regular kind of service in the church. Okay. Another problem with religion is they are taking political sides, and that makes them parochial, tribal, and narrow. So the good people, they keep themselves away from this. Swamiji had said more than 127 years ago, he says, there is a chance of Vedanta becoming the religion of this country because of democracy. But today, democratic institutions and ideologies are more divisive than ever. It will take even a longer time for people to recognize that, yes, there is democracy and there are democratic institutions. As pure democracy, we can be one. But till that time comes, it's going to be a while. Another prediction Swamiji had also made, he says, this is the best time for Vedanta, according to me and according to many scholars. Why? Because he says this doctrine of Vedanta has always been in India. It was brought forward whenever materialism and skepticism broke down everything. So this is the age of materialism and skepticism. So we have the movement, a tremendous platform to relaunch ourselves. Vedanta in America has launched itself a couple of times, but not far enough. So this is the time, and people are materialists and skeptics. Now, what are the dangers of the Vedanta movement stagnating? We have been, in all honesty, we have been stagnating for a few decades now. Yes, decades, the movement has been stagnating. We are simply holding on. Okay. The first is the Vedanta societies in the US, they followed the Protestant style of, you can say, religious models. That is, you go and we are called ministers and pastors. We go and have a kind of a choir, and then you have a talk, and then you meet people. This was the perfect Protestant style, because Protestants are more numerous. About 70% of the people here are Protestants. About 25% are Catholics. So this Protestant style, and we used to dress up in suits and coats, just try to be a kind of a hybrid American and a preacher. kind of. So it is found that this Protestant style of operation is now passe, in the sense of Protestant churches themselves are going empty. Protestants are not following their own kind of religion, and to model something on Protestantism, Protestant model, we have suffered collateral damage. Beginning in the 1980s, when there was a huge, you can say, opening for immigrants, especially from India, and we had a lot of highly educated, highly professional people coming in, and there was a huge kind of, you can say, influx of people. It was this diaspora which is here, is extremely successful. And being Indians, they used to gravitate towards Vedanta societies. And in time, it became more like a kind of an India club. We used to speak in the Indian languages. That dropped away most of the local people. They thought it, oh my, this is another kind of a Indian thing. And we began to emphasize more on the ritualism instead of the pure kind of Vedanta. We have been also very poorly performing where the Spanish-speaking people called Latinos and the Black Americans are concerned. The South Americans, the Latinos, are extremely religious, extremely devoted, and extremely firm in their faith. We have not been able to. We have just few Spanish publications. We have just a few speakers who can communicate in Spanish. So a large chunk, a growing chunk, in fact, in California, there are now more Spanish-speaking people than the local people. And all the signs, road signs and everything are in English and in Spanish. And in many places, they are Spanish and English. So the Spanish-speaking population, that is, are growing. That has been a drawback for us. In the earlier 60s and 70s, there was a huge, you can say, social oppression. We know that it was during this time that the fight against draft of the against the Vietnam War, and then the hippie movement, a kind of a subculture. There was, during the 60s and 70s, a huge, you can say, population of people, young people, who were attracted to Vedanta. And that was because there was something called the New Ageism. Buddhism, the philosophy of yoga and tantra, this was a New Ageism, was a kind of a hodgepodge of many kind of things all around. And people were drawn to these Vedanta societies en masse. The hippie movement in the US spread all over the world, yet it has fizzled out. That those persons, the remnants are still there. They are very staunch devotees, but it's all gone. So that part, that phase is also, it rose and fell. Okay. Then in the early years, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, we had great intellectuals, professors, literary people being attracted towards Vedanta. And they formed the second tier of this Vedanta movement. Today, there's almost none. Vedanta societies can't attract these kind of intellectuals. That's because we are not interpreting things which they can relate to. And Swamiji has also is clear that Vedanta can work on the spiritual level, the intellectual level, the societal level, every level. So we have been neglecting this kind of the work on the intellectual level. And that's the reason why there's a huge kind of paucity of thinking, intellectual people, etc. Okay. Then we have a greatest problem here, that the Native American population, they have got the roots very deep into religion and mysticism. Their religion and mythology could easily have been absorbed by Vedanta. We have neglected them completely. In fact, if the Native American population would come, we would be also inheriting their ideas of a sacred mountain, sacred trees, rivers, places, worship. This would have been a kind of impetus, because in India, we have the sacred mountains, rivers and streams and valleys and temples, etc., etc. But today, because of this social discrimination, they are completely neglected. They suffer from very poor education, very ill health, and economic, you can say, pariahs here. They are somehow struggling. We should have been able to attract all those people. And then the Black American people, they have got very strong religious roots, tremendous religious roots. But right now, they are more interested in correcting the social disparities. It's extremely important. Like when I said they are fighting for the Black Lives Matter, etc. They are pushing back on many of the oppressive rules and regulations that were imposed on them, and they're voicing. So it will be some time till we can attract this vast number of African Americans here. And they do have their spiritual, you can say, growth, and they have Black churches. And I've interacted with many of them. They're extremely, extremely religious. But right now, their focus is on the social uplift of Black Americans. During this 60s, 70s, as I mentioned, there was a huge influx of many Gurujis and Babajis also. Amazingly, along with the Indian immigrants. Now, these Gurujis and Babajis, they have either passed away, or you can say, or their disciples have left them. Most of their organizations are in a shambles. These are the people who are looking for some kind of spiritual anchor. Vedanta has been attracting some of them, but we are also finding it difficult to disabuse them of their kind of silly ideas of spirituality, which they had been kind of injected with. But they are searching for this. So there are n number of organizations and yoga centers in the US and Canada, of course, that there are people, but there are no spiritual leaders now. And those who had kind of succeeded those original gurus and babajis are busy quarreling amongst themselves. Okay. Most of them who are attracted towards this International Society of Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, where they kind of sing and dance. This and that. Okay. Then we also had a similar, you can say, influx of Buddhist monks teaching Zen. And they became extremely popular. It is extremely popular because people who have a religious inclination, they want some form of spirituality. They don't want all the trappings of a personal God and rituals and hymns and this and that associated with that. They want it pure and simple, quick. And Buddhism, with its dependence on self-culture and meditation and the dismissal of a personal God, etc., was extremely, extremely attracted to them. So people went out in droves. Then a lot of people who were psychologists, in fact, a very famous psychologist, were all practicing Buddhists. They never used to acknowledge it. But today, there are real good researchers in psychology and psychiatry who say that they are practicing Buddhist. They practice meditation according to Buddhist. That's because the psychology of Buddhism is without any kind of bogeyman or extra kind of things, extraneous causes. They are kind of quite well laid out, and that's what attracted them. So these are the second class of people that we could be attracting. These. Then in California, there are more yoga centers, I had read, than in all of India. Every street corner you have some yoga center. But these yoga centers are nothing but Hatha Yoga centers. And these Hatha Yoga centers are actually, each teacher has modified practice accordingly. Like instead of Hatha Yoga, there are many institutions called Hot Yoga. You get the idea. So there are various, you can say, disparate, you can say, organizations teaching yoga. Yoga studios are become integral in American society, especially, like I said, in the West Coast and in the East Coast. So these are some of the things that are going on. Some of them, they inquire into higher aspects than just plain the physical side of yoga. And we must be able to attract such people. Okay. Now, America today is a land of immigrants. Either they are first or second or third or fourth generation. It's just 245 years old, the United States of America. Though it is around 1600s, mid-1600s, that the first immigrants from England had come. And it is a kind of a huge melting pot going on here. It is very clear. When I see these people, I said, this was the very thing that happened in India 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, and the process took thousands of years ago. We are seeing a kind of replica of what happened in India. Many different types of people and races and immigrants came in and they melded, and what we have today is the modern India and Indians. So the US is also undergoing this great melting pot. It has not crystallized. It will take a few centuries to crystallize because this melding of races takes a long time. So, and in this, we can also inject Vedanta so that it will become part of, you can say, the mainstream culture. We also have a kind of a renewed interest in Hinduism amongst people. But unfortunately, there are a lot of professors and teachers in universities especially, that they have a very negative idea of Hinduism. They associate Hinduism with fundamentalism and right-wingism. And that's why they think, oh, Hinduism associated with they are fundamentalists and they are right-wingers. So they are teaching the students and you can say college and school students accordingly. So Vedanta preachers, we must be able to go to those universities and be able to counter them. And that we'll have to understand what is the political and social situation here. It's extremely important. So we have also the idea that there are certain people, class of people here, having their roots in Judaism. They are Jews. You know, Jews always have a kind of a mystical streak in them. And that has always attracted them to this Vedanta. In all the centers you'll find some of these old devotees, they have their Jewish roots. And then also we have something called these Native Americans, we must be able to also attract them, in fact, go to them in the reservations, talk to them, and they will contribute their own spirituality to us, to Vedanta, and that will become wonderful. Now, these professors, etc., that they are teaching the students with all these kind of distorted ideas about Hinduism, most of them are, as I say, postmodernist. And this is what is kind of spreading in India. Postmodernism is nothing but old Marxism in a new bottle. Okay. And so we must be able to understand postmodernism and tackle them, because they rely on identity politics and divisions, of course. We also find that most of the Vedanta societies for the last 100 years we are operating, we have not been able to combine together in a kind of a unified. We have one center there and one center here, and that Swami there and that Swami there. They hardly interact. Occasionally, we must be able to interact on all levels so that we can provide a united front and a united message. So, and it will have a kind of an energetic effect on some of the centers which are stagnating. So if you move the Swamis around, speakers around, it will be extremely important. You see, the whole world looks towards America as a kind of an icon, as a kind of an ideal. Swamiji, when he was preaching here in the West, he was aware that if I hit one blow in America, it echoes even louder in India. In fact, India was awakened because Swamiji preached in the US. It's very clear. The whole India was roused that, oh my God, we have one representative of Hinduism who has gone to them and preached them, and the whole nation awoke. Today, if we can really preach to Vedanta, to the United States, all the Western countries in Europe or in other parts of the world, they look towards America as a kind of a standard. It will awaken, it will find echoes also in those lands if we can really implement these ideas of Vedanta in the American soil. It will be a tremendous impact, worldwide impact. It's not only an impact on India, it's going to have now worldwide, you can say, impacts. Because like Sri Ramakrishna is saying, these babus, if they have eaten that, then it's good enough for us. You know, there are some rustic bumpkins who had gone, they couldn't identify what dish was served to them. And they said, if it's good for the babus, it's good enough for us. So this will have a kind of a domino effect on other countries also. Swamiji also is very clear that he says, whenever nations have been interconnected, whenever great conquering powers have joined nations and societies together, out has poured Indian spirituality. Saying it happened before the Persian Empire, it happened during the Persian Empire, it happened during the Greek rise, and then now with the, you can say, advent of the English, we have linked everything together. Out is flowing Indian spirituality. And every nation has its own character. Like a person, we have a particular character. Different people have different characteristics. If you put all the nations together, every nation has its own characteristics. And India's national characteristic was religion and religion alone. He's saying if you give it up, in 50 years, your back will be broken. Swamiji is very clear. So we have a duty as Indians, as Hindus, as Vedanta, to hold on to this spirituality and spread it out. In the process, you will find a kind of a new world culture emerging because of this interconnectivity everywhere. We are finding there is a kind of a universal culture that's being growing, whether that person is in South Korea or whether in Japan or New Zealand or in France or Germany. People are beginning to think alike in a way. They are getting into a new world culture because of the interconnectivity. And this is where Vedanta will have to come in, because this new universal culture that's forming right before our eyes will need a spirituality which will be in consonance with the present as also in the future. Swamiji had always said a little materialism is good for us because India was poor and all these things. And we find, and for them, a little spirituality will be good enough. So he wanted to balance both. So this pursuit of this spirituality will be integral in this modern, upcoming, new world order that is being formed right before our eyes. So the first generation of monks, they were the direct disciples. Swami Vivekananda, of course, 1893, he came. And he's telling Swami Turiyananda in, you can say, in India. You see, whatever is happening there is happening for me. The organizing of the Parliament of Religions. Okay. Then we have Swami Turiyananda, Swami Abhedananda lived for 25 years. Swami, you can see, Shardananda came, Swami Trigunatitananda came, who was the only direct disciple who laid down his body here in the US. The second generation of monks were the disciples of these disciples, and some were mother's disciples. Tremendous spirituality they had, tremendous. They held everything together and integrated things together. That was essential, because otherwise what happens, the foundations was laid by them, and they spend their entire life here, most of them. Like we have the direct disciples, mainly Swami Brahmananda's these disciples who came here, with the exception of course, Swami Asheshananda, who was Holy Mother's disciple, and Swami Nikhilananda, who was also Holy Mother's disciple. So this generation has passed. The third generation of monks that came were the disciples of those disciples. And they also, with their dynamism, they spread a lot in this country. They had a beautiful, you can say, a foundation already laid down, plus social changes with like New Ageism and Buddhism and yoga, etc., people being dissatisfied with religion. These people came together, but they have not been able to lift them on the next level. The present generation of monks have a great deal of task before them to hold on to the ancient values of Vedanta, to hold on to the values of the Vedanta movement in the US, and yet look forward and push it. So what some of our centers are doing is they are laying too much emphasis on the personal God aspect of Vedanta. This has turned away many people. And Swamiji himself was kind of accused one time, why didn't you preach Ramakrishna? Saying they already have their avatars. Why do you have to have another avatar? So we'll have to go straight to the very, you can say, traditional text and interpret them accordingly. And those who come very close to us, they can be taught about Sri Ramakrishna, etc. We also have a lot of Buddhists coming here, and we keep the pictures or statues of Buddha on our altars. Most of our altars have this Buddha. Okay. Now, we've seen Swamiji come 1893, things are prepared, he came, spoke, etc. And he spent his, you can say, the best part of his life preaching here in the US. And then, even before that, okay, first in Rameshwaram, Vivekananda Rock, he saw Sri Ramakrishna beckoning him to cross the waters. And he wasn't sure. So he wrote to Holy Mother, and Holy Mother kind of attested to his, you can say, that vision that it is Sri Ramakrishna's will. You should travel. And that came as a kind of a, you can say, an opening for him. Even before that, he had the vision of India that was going to be glorious. He says, there she is sitting rejuvenated on a throne. None can take her down anymore, etc. So he was sure of that. Even before that, in Dwarka, before he came to the South India, in Dwarka when he was there, in that old mutt of Shankaracharya, he had the vision of a future India. When he was looking out at the Arabian Sea, he saw a bright, luminous light. So he was sure that this was going to be India. And as I said, he was going to be an instrument in the Lord's hand. Even before that, one time, Holy Mother took food for Sri Ramakrishna in his room, and she found him in Samadhi. And it was such a deep Samadhi, and she was frightened. And she started weeping. And when she started weeping, Ramlal and others, they came and said, what happened? Then she remembered, Sri Ramakrishna told her, whenever you see me in the stage, rub my feet. And that's what she was doing. And she was weeping. And then Sri Ramakrishna came out of his Bhava Samadhi. What happened? Then he saw that they were so frightened. They said, no, I'm fine. I went to the land of the white people. Their skins are so white, their hearts are so white. And I think I will go there. So, you see, the Vedanta movement started there with Sri Ramakrishna's vision of him coming to the West. And there are instances where Swami Shardananda, he goes to a place, a woman devotee in New Jersey, and he shows her the picture of Sri Ramakrishna, and she was startled. This is the person I've been looking for. This is the person I seen in my vision when I was young, and I've been searching all my life. And Sharat Maharaj says, Shardananda, you see, we think that we are preaching Vedanta. It is actually Sri Ramakrishna who is doing that. And with that, I will close my presentation here and also thank Swami Sarvastananda. We can open it out for questions if there are. So, I can't hear you, Swami.
So there is one, Mr. Saxena, who says it's an amazing exposition and excellent strategic understanding. Strategy, I mean, you have discussed a lot of strategy, how things could be changed. So that's a right approach, more pragmatic, not just explaining the theory beyond what is actually happening. Yes. That's why we wanted you to speak how things are, the movement is unfolding itself. You know, it requires thinking at so many levels, not just.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it has to be worked out on various levels.
Various levels, because people are at various levels. Sri Ramakrishna had that wonderful talent of raising people from where they are. You can't just say.
Oh, yes.
So that is one, they are very happy that You have covered that, and a very strategic, your strategic understanding of the American society, or specific, the Western culture in general has been appreciated. And then he says, could not agree more that the Ramakrishna Mission is just the vanguard of a new spiritual movement worldwide. So deeply indebted to his other talks, especially on mantra yoga. So he must have heard you. Yes. So then one more question. Yeah, raising so many long-term questions. What can a ordinary householder do? This is a very, very, very nice question. Uh, Very pragmatic. She says, Srila Banerjee, she's from UK.
Yeah. Mm.
What can the ordinary householder do to help you in this work? So you talk something about what role they can play. Of course, monks will
Yes.
do their bit.
I was kind of, for the last a year or more, I was giving some practical uh, classes on mantra yoga and meditation, etc., like Mr. Saxena has mentioned. And so it was kind of designed as a kind of a module. It's a kind of a format. And then there were questions. One question was, can we do this in person with you? One of my answers was, now you have already a kind of a format. You have it on YouTube. You learn these processes and then you implement them. You become a yoga teacher. You don't need any kind of big accreditation. She was already a yoga teacher and she wanted to kind of deepen her teachings. I said, you do it. And that's what I can also tell Srila, that Swami Sarvagatananda Ji Maharaj, who was a disciple of Swami Akhandananda Ji Maharaj, who lived for many years and worked for many years in Boston and Providence. He was a dynamo of spirituality. In one of his talks in St. Louis, he says that it's not only the responsibility of the monks, it's a responsibility of the devotees also. And that is what Ramakrishna Mission is. It is a combining both these forces of ancient monasticism renewed with a social commitment and the people who are devoted to Sri Ramakrishna. It is actually every person's mission. Take it up as a mission to spread Vedanta, because you have received a lot from Vedanta and from the Ramakrishna. And it is your job, your responsibility to transmit this to others. First, try to bring into your life certain aspects of Vedanta. Try to be loving and compassionate, and people will come to you and ask you. Like here in the US, and people say, hey, what do you believe in? And then I explain, oh, really? So people will come to you. You don't have to literally go to them. First, transform yourself with the teachings of Vedanta, and that will help spread Vedanta more and more. The problem is now we are all living in a kind of a bubble. People come, listen to Vedanta lectures, and go back, and they are the same old people. It's like, Sri Ramakrishna says, like when you bathe an elephant, clean an elephant, and then that fellow will keep on throwing mud over him. So just before nightfall, if you clean him and put him in that kind of big kind of shed, then there's less chance of getting muddy. So we are in the process of, we are listening to Vedanta, learning Vedanta, this and that, and then we go back to the same old life. We need to change our same old life into something different, divine. Sri Ramakrishna is the incarnation of this age, is a Yuga avatar. His gospel is the gospel for this age. His message is this. And everything that he has said, if you can bring it slowly there with you will find a transformation. And this is how Vedanta will spread. It's not only the monks who are going to do that preaching and teaching, it is you devotees also. So we need to, in fact, I've been telling devotees here, it's your responsibility also. It's not just my responsibility. You owe your allegiance to the order, to Sri Ramakrishna. Let's see you work out some of that allegiance. Because we are giving our lives to this. There was a time when somebody asked me, do you all get paid? I said, paid? Why? I said, no, this has been the tradition of India to impart knowledge for the last 5,000-6,000 years free to sincere people. The gift of knowledge is the highest gift, Swamiji says. So the gift of spiritual knowledge. So this is what it is. So keep on, and you will find you getting better and better. Every time we need to prepare and kind of work on a kind of a talk, we become better. We become kind of more sharp. So the same thing is going to happen with you also. Srila, thank you very much.
Yes, there's one more question.
Yeah.
He says, how does the hedonistic world accept Vedanta philosophy that whatever we experience through our sense objects are unreal and the reality is deep within, beyond the body-mind complex? So this, how can the hedonistic world really accept the spirit? That's the question.
We are the least bothered for hedonistic people because we have a tremendous friend with us. You know who's a friend? Who's dismissing all the hedonistic ideas? Science. So by aligning ourselves with science, we have had this kind of tremendous relevance today. And Vedanta will be like that. It will never be distinct from science. So science is telling you what your hedonism is, a kind of a chimera, an illusion. What you're running after is nothing but a kind of a fantasy. But of course, Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda says, yes, they are the children of Virochana who take their body for the Atma. And we are the children of Indra who further, you can say, inquired. They got the same teachings from their father Prajapati. But these, the children of descendants of Virochana were satisfied with it. And most of us are like that. The body is the Atman right now. But if the hedonist, this had been dealt with hundreds of times. For the last 8,000 or 9,000 years of human society history, has anyone ever said that hedonism is bad? Oh, sorry, hedonism is good, that we have been successful, that we have got all the pleasure in life? They have been weeping. So for 8,000 years, we have been weeping. Those who have been running after pursuing pleasure, they find everything zero. So why should we try to dissuade them? Nature, the laws of karma itself will dissuade them, will kick them out. So when you're young, you are hedonistic. When you're old, you become a little wiser with all the gray hair, and then you start croaking a little about the futility of all life. Today's modern generation, thank God, they are more perceptive. They understand that the pursuit of knowledge is much better, more satisfying than the pursuit of pleasure. Swami Vivekananda says, knowledge is the goal of man. Pleasure is not the goal of man. Pleasure and pain pass before the soul and educates it. So we'll wait for them to veer and come around to us, to Vedanta. So we don't need to go down there. They will learn their lesson. Life will teach them the lessons.
Yeah. So that was exactly a question asked by somebody, how to teach the children. But the Srila again makes a remark that everybody is trying to avoid the mud and trying to change. I'm trying to change myself, which is being repeated by everyone. Everybody says, you change yourself, everything will be okay, I mean, everything will be changed around you. But nobody has said that I can actually teach. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So that
Yeah,
is
you
the,
can.
yeah. So she would like to know the framework, what framework you have, and how it could be used by somebody who does not just want to change himself or herself, but make a difference in the children or somebody else.
Yeah. I will. I'll tell you. Uh, on YouTube, you'll find meditation for beginners, a series of about 15 classes. Then we have meditation skills for meditators. That's about 12 or 13 classes. Go through them, extract the teachings there, teach the children to sit and meditate. Just simply saying, God dwells in your heart will not do. Teach them how to concentrate. And secondly, we have a Sunday schools, and we have here in Seattle something called the Mother's Children. Okay. We are also teaching children. And this is the best age where you can teach people when they're young. They will grow up with these ideas. They may forget it in the interim period because of their careers, but it will come back to them. So read the gospel, or if not there, then take the tales and parables of Sri Ramakrishna, take the teachings of Holy Mother, take Swamiji's, you can say, teachings, and start something. Teach them the basics. And then as you keep on teaching, you start, you can say, fine-tuning your own methods. You will find your own methods of reaching out to them.
Yeah. So before I read a nice remark somebody has made, I'll read it out to you. But before that, yes, I'll conclude with that. So thank you, Swami, for scaling the breadth and depth of the communities, big and small, that are included and have accidentally been excluded in spreading the unique and transformative life that is Vedanta. I mean, in the Vedanta movement in the West, we
Yes.
have excluded many communities, as you said,
Yes.
the the original Indians who were there.
Yes. Yes.
And thank you for giving us devotees the responsibility of taking this forward. This is from Vayu Naidu, who is herself involved in teaching and teaching children the ancient values of Hinduism and the myths.
Yeah.
And yeah, as many of us are going to live longer, blessed that we break through the cynicism of ageism and spring forth with the wellspring of Vedanta from the vision of Sri Ramakrishna Swamiji and through generations of Swamis and devotees in India and its diaspora. Okay, so that is a nice conclusion. It was well received and we are very happy. You have also completed exactly on time, unlike yesterday, which went on and on and on. But today, all of them, everybody concluded exactly to the minute. We were all, we were anyway.
Thank you.
But one thing I just wanted to ask you, you're talking about the children's sessions. Do you need some kind of permission or professional counselors to have a degree before they can teach children? Because in UK they are very strict.
Yes.
You
Even
need
here,
to
they
have
are very
something on
strict.
child psychology. Of course, the
Yes.
courses
Yeah.
that are accepted.
Yes.
So if they teach Vedanta, it is allowed. But
yes. You know what? We have teachers here. I mean, volunteers, teachers. They are also professionals. They also have done these kind of courses of counseling, etc.
Yeah.
In psychology, they teach. And what we do is we go and tell them a few little stories, like say from Harishchandra or something like that, And so that is kind of really amazing.
Yeah.
So these Puranas are full of these stories. Amazing.
Yeah.
So my job is to go and just say, I'm going to tell you a story. And that's what. And they love it.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's what Vayu also is trying to do. She uses the storytelling method to explain to the children. That's a nice skill if it is developed. Thakur himself was a great storyteller.
Oh, yeah,
Ramakrishna, one of the greatest storytellers.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you, Satyamayanji Maharaj. Hope to see
Thank you very much.
soon. Maybe we a whole year we are planning some sessions so that
Sure.
we take this opportunity. We missed out. Swami Vivekananda came here in 1895 for the first time.
Yes.
So we wanted to celebrate his 125th anniversary of his visiting
Hmm.
UK, where he said, "Put ideas in London is my,"
Exactly.
and that
Yeah.
will spread all over the world because we are still colonized. Most of the
Yes.
colonies, I mean, England had colonized many countries. So
Right.
it was an opportunity at that time. Of course, now
Yes.
it can be done because of internet and all. You can, there's no effect
Right.
of this political. Yeah. So anyway, so we were planning, but because of COVID, we had to postpone. So we'd like to combine now with somehow, even if it is late, we can use this opportunity. So we will be having
Sure.
many more sessions like this 3-day session. Tomorrow also we are having Australia, Southeast Asia is to be covered, Australia and New Zealand, Fiji. So two Swamis will cover that, and finally we'll end with Mayavati. Vireshanji will speak on
Ah,
the confluence of the East and West,
right.
especially Mr. and Captain and Mrs. Saviour's contribution.
Mister. Hmm.
Of course, you could have also done a wonderful job of that because you were there.
Yeah.
Saviors have contributed a lot. I mean, they are
Oh,
for
yeah.
they sold their house to build Mayavati.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
Amazing.
Mayavati
Amazing.
owes its existence to Mother Savior.
To Mother Savior. Hmm.
The wonderful
That's true.
sacrifice, these stories have to be told, how
Oh,
the
yes.
movement unfolded.
Hmm.
Anyway, thank you once again, and we will
Thank
conclude
you.
now. Namaste.
Thank
Bye.
you. Jai Thakur.
Jai Thakur. Jai Thakur.